The Elder Scrolls lore, the first era. Hi, my name is Crazy Jamesy. Today's video, we will be going over the first official era of the Elder Scrolls series. If you're new to this, I'm currently doing a series going over every single era, one era per video. We recently went through the Dawn era and the Merithic era, and now we're going to tackle the first era. So, it is important to understand that in the first era, we don't really know much about what actually happened. It's one of those eras where a lot of history was, in fact, lost. And the games that we currently have don't have too much to offer in terms of what exactly went on. But of course, like I mentioned before in previous videos, the lore is written to be misleading on purpose at times, which it makes it incredibly hard to say for a fact that this particular thing happened. This is just what we know about logistically what happened during this time. So to start off, we will talk about the war with the Aelids, because that has happened pretty much right now. We're still not in the first era yet, but this is what's happened in the transition in between the first and the Merithic eras. War breaks out in the Aelid kingdoms. Saint Alicia, along with her fellow slaves, and yes, she was a slave to the Aelids, rebels, along with all of her people that are rebelling with her. But another hero by the name of Pelena Whitestrake, which we covered in the last video, he helps Saint Alicia fight back against the Aelids, and actually cripples and eventually defeats, supposedly, the Aelid king Umaril, the Unfeathered. It's heavily implied that both Pelena Whitestrake and Umaril are from different culpas, meaning different universes within the Elder Scrolls entirely, and that they actually hail from somewhere else, and they are the leftovers from the previous timeline that got destroyed. But we don't know for certain if they are from different timelines or not, but it's heavily implied. Now, in terms of what happened to Pelena Whitestrake after, well, Umaril's most loyal subjects found him and ganked him so hard that they cut him into like 9 different pieces. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this, 9 different pieces, exactly. And one of Pelena Whitestrake's friends, he finds his head and actually has a conversation with him for several hours before he actually dies. So there's that insanity. And after this war's concluded, and Saint Alicia and her servants won, she becomes the Empress of Cyrodiil. Presumably the first ever leader of men in this, quotations, modern empire. But it's important to know that all of Tamriel is not under one banner. The Empire has not conquered anyone else yet. They just rule Cyrodiil. And that is it. Completely it. The Skyrim game introduced the Dawnguard DLC, which has Harkon and his family as the main antagonists of the story / protagonist, because of Serana. And it's heavily implied with Serana's dialogue that, for a fact, she was around before the Empire was established. And I hardly doubt that Harkon and Serana and Valerica got cursed and did the whole Molech Ball ritual during the first era. For it to make any sense, it would have to been before the first era, meaning pre-history, because eras marks start of the Empire, because that's when they started cataloging history in a very effective way. So, during this time, in the transition between the Merithic era and First era, or it might have been just exclusively in the Merithic era, Harkon is a powerful king, presumably in Skyrim, and they are not vampires currently. And at some point in the transition, something happened, and that whole ritual went on, and they became who they are today. And then, probably about a few hundred years after, Serana gets entrapped, and this happens over the course of the end of the Merithic era throughout the First era. And this is my basically fan theory about this too. Don't take it with like a certainty, but definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, with Serana's dialogue, it definitely points to this person was around. All of them were around during the Merithic era, because that's the only way it would make sense for that dialogue to be actually valid. And that's about it. Now, the details on what went on exactly, besides what Serana says in the game, we'll probably never know. But that's just the gist in the scope of how old Harkon's family is. For those that were really curious, they predate history in terms of how old they are. They are Merithic era level of old. So yeah, if you were sitting there going like, oh yeah, Serana is basically a grandmother, no, much older, like probably about 500 greats on top of the grandmother title. That's how old Serana, Valerica, and Harkon are. Just to put that into perspective. Now, moving on. The Empire is established, and shortly after Saint Alicia's death, it is said that Pelna Whitestrake visited her, even though he's presumably dead, which also reinforces the fact that he is from a different timeline and can manipulate time. And also hints to the fact that he is a confirmed Shazarian, as we discussed in the previous video. Now, in her dying moments, Akatosh presumably appears to her and shows his kindness by giving her a piece of his blood in what it was now known as the Amulet of Kings. And as long as the dragonfires remain lit, Oblivion could no longer enslave her or her empire that she built. And that was Akatosh's promise. Now, was this vision from Akatosh actually Pelna Whitestrake, since he is a Shazarian? Or was it actually just Akatosh? Who knows? Who knows? But we do know that this is where the Amulet Kings was made. And somehow, presumably she might have gave it to somebody on her deathbed, I don't know. But presumably, she did indeed have an heir. Because shortly after, in the woods, a little baby in a crib, or a basket, in the woods, would be wearing the Amulet of Kings. And this little baby would grow up to be the man known as Raymond Cyrodiil. And I know quite a few ears perked up because he is a very talked about figure, and rightfully so, because he is what presumably the entire province is named after. And he's the first emperor of Tamriel. His predecessor was the first empress. He is the first emperor. And he basically eventually rises to the occasion and is elected emperor, with the blades from Akavir being his most, in recorded history, friendliest guys in his ascension, meaning they are the ones that voted the hardest for him to be emperor. And it's also implied that Raymond is probably from Akavir. I'm not going to say that for a fact, because with his origins, it's kind of something that's just up for debate. Like, it's just kind of something up for debate. And also, why are the Akaviri here? I couldn't really tell you for a fact. There are so many theories and so many people saying different things. I don't really know if I can give you a solid answer. But just know that they're here, okay? I wasn't joking about not knowing much about the First Era. This is what we got, pretty much, to work with. It sucks, but that's what happens with history sometimes. You just kind of have to piece together with what you got. But it's important to note that he did become emperor. And Cyrodiil got its empire fully established as the Imperial Empire of Man. Noted, they didn't start conquering yet. That's not until the Second Era. But they did get established in their own homeland. And they drove out the Aelids completely. Well, alright. I know it's been a while. I thank all of you for your patience, and I thank all of you that are supporting. And we're almost at 100 subs. And 400 subs, I think I'm going to do a live stream when we hit that margin. I also want to get back to live streaming pretty regularly again, at least once a week, if I can. I'm currently struggling to find, you know, a day job currently, which sucks. But that's just how life goes. Now, in terms of the lore and anything that you're confused about, like, oh, well, how exactly, like how exactly did we get here? Click this playlist right here, where you can watch all of the videos that we do here on this lore series. Thanks again. And as always, I'll see you later. Peace out, and have a very wonderful, blessed day.